to look at is how and to what extent the failure to provide those services. Hello?
Hold on 1 second.
Just click.
Yeah,
There you
and then click off your transcript on this side.
go. Thank you. All right,
Okay.
sorry about that.
Okay, we're back.
Yes.
Okay, so when you know that you need to consider compensatory services, first thing you look at is to what extent did the failure of your district to provide services negatively impact that student's progress in the gen ed curriculum and their ability to meet the goals of their IEP. So it's not a question of how much time did we miss, it's a question of what was the impact on student performance of however much time we missed. You have to determine the scope of the remedies that you need to put in place to bring that child to wherever he was reasonably expected to be, if not for that failure to provide services. And as you know, this is an estimate. This is a guess. This is based on what the IEP said in the first place. When you think about the IEP being a set of annual goals, you would expect that all those goals would be met in a year. So how long was a child without services? Was he without services for a week or two, a month or two, or a year? And that would help your team determine where this child would reasonably have been had you provided the services the way you had planned to. Then that team must determine how much, what kind, how often, what kind of services are owed to that student to put them where they were expected to be, had they been receiving services all along. So then the team would determine, are those compensatory services warranted in the first place? The district must document, this is typically through a PWN, how that determination was made. That means, what data did you look at? How do you know there was a denial of services that impacted student performance? How do you know the impact? Where did you expect them to be versus where are they? And that would be based on data. And then, what services are you planning to provide? What services can be the type of service? It would include who's doing it, where it's going to be done, the frequency, all of that. It's like a little IEP, but it is not an IEP. Compensatory services are separate from an IEP. The district has to document the amount, the type, the frequency of additional compensatory services. That word additional is key because your IEP services have to continue. This is in addition to whatever you would be providing ordinarily through the IEP services. So you have the IEP going, it's still doing what you had anticipated doing. On top of that, now you're providing compensatory services to address things you didn't do appropriately before. But the district has to also document how that determination was made, as I said, regarding the amount, the time, the frequency of the services that you believe that student needs. Now, because it's what you believe the student needs, this is an estimate. So that means if you say we are going to provide 14 hours of compensatory services, 14 may be dead right. But at the end of those 14 hours of compensatory services, you need to again assess, where is that student? Because if that student is not yet where they would have been, but for your denial of services, then you're not finished. So when you determine up front a set amount of services, that is the anticipated amount of compensatory services. The actual amount is based on that child's performance. Sometimes children who have been without any educational services for quite some time make progress leaps and bounds very, very quickly as soon as instruction is resumed. They may make their progress return to where you would have anticipated they be, but for the denial, in a much quicker period of time. And if they do, that's okay. That's great. But if they don't, if it takes a little longer, then you just provide services a little longer, because compensatory services are not over until that student is where you would have anticipated that they be, but for your denial of services. In addition to the consideration of factors, you have to provide the description, who's going to do it, and that person's credentials, because remember that special ed services must be provided by appropriately certified staff. The proposed timeline, and again, proposed is in bold-faced type there because this is what you think. It may or may not be entirely 100% accurate, but this is your best guess based on the expertise of the team members and the clear description of what services were not provided. Finally, the district must be able to provide documentation of the completion of services. That is your service logs, a spreadsheet of services, the actual compensatory services planning sheet, planning document, which we do have available from our office. But this is where you would actually be able to document what did you do and where is the student. Sometimes you may need to submit that evidence. It depends on the circumstances. In many cases, you may have determined that a child needs compensatory services with no intervention from the department at all. And that's a good thing. When you recognize that a mistake has been made and you need to address services, for you to go ahead and do it and not wait for a complaint to be filed, that is in your favor. That's to your benefit. So go ahead and do that and keep your documentation just as you would for any other services you're providing. Anybody got any questions so far? Okay. Some reminders for compensatory services is that the goals of the IEP are for the usual school year. Compensatory services are above and beyond that. So you will have to identify specific goals for compensatory services. They may parallel your IEP goals. They will be in addition to, and they may be goals that must be met before the IEP goals can be met. It may be something that is prerequisite to the IEP goals because remember, it is what you had planned originally that wasn't provided. The description regarding the decisions about compensatory services should be documented in a PWN. They may also be in meeting minutes. They may also be in a separate compensatory services plan, any of that. But however you do it, you need to upload any created forms into whatever IEP system we're using at that time, because it does need to become part of the child's record. And if the child is determined to be eligible for extended school year, that's in addition to this. Compensatory services are not extended school year. It is not summer school. It is not makeup work. It is a set of services that the district needs to provide because of a denial of FAPE. So this is acknowledging we made a mistake. This is how we're going to fix it. Any questions about that? Oftentimes when people are talking to us about compensatory services, they call them homebound, they call them home-based, they call them extended school year, they call them all kinds of things. Just remember and be very clear that compensatory services are not any of those things. They are above and beyond and separate from all of that. Compensatory services may be provided during the same time periods as summer school or extended school year or something like that, but a child could be eligible for both. So you cannot just send the child to extended school year and call it compensatory. Those are two different purposes under the regulations. So make sure that you are very clear and you clearly delineate what services you are providing for what reasons. And that is essentially the basic overview. If you have any questions about, in general, the process, certainly you can contact me. There's my contact information on the screen. Or you can work through Sarah McKay, who, as part of your new directors, and she can get the questions to wherever they need to go. I will say that we do have a Moodle course on compensatory services that walks through the entire process. It does provide documentation methods for determining how the need for compensatory services, the consideration of data, the actual development of your plan, how to document the plan, and all of that kind of information. But there is no magic formula for compensatory services. Compensatory services are child by child determined. There is not a district policy, a district plan overall for compensatory. It must be an individual child by child examination of data and circumstances, and then plan to remedy. Any questions from anybody about what we can tell you about compensatory services?
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
So the first one is if it's due, let's say if it's a related service that's unable to be provided, does that, and so we need to offer compensatory services. Can that be during the school day, or does that have to be before or after school?
Like every other question in special ed, it's kind of an it depends. Because you cannot, for the sake of compensatory services, remove the child from either time that is designated in the IEP as gen ed or time that is designated in the IEP as special ed. So more often than not, it is in addition to the school day. Now, there are times, there's some release time, there are times that are school-wide free periods, free time, if you will. And sometimes it may be able to be provided for a part of that, but that would be, again, a child-by-child decision. But typically, it would have to be in addition to, because it would impact LRE otherwise.
And then my second question is with the staffing kind of issues that we're having right now with special education and related service providers.
Right.
Is this kind of the best course of action if a service provider is unable to be located or to provide those services? Is part compensatory services the best
Right.
course of action, or are there others that can be considered?
Well, compensatory is certainly one way to do it. But there are also some ways, just depending on how you write the IEP in the first place. I know we have talked about this for years, and it came about largely because of Medicaid billing, which is not an IDEA issue, but certainly we know a lot of districts rely on it. But if you have a service that is written to be provided 2 hours a week, then that means 2 hours a week. If you have a service that is provided 15 days a quarter, then that gives you some wiggle room. As long as you can then make it up during that quarter, it doesn't have to become compensatory. So that leaves that door open a little more for providing it during the school day, because they would have been pulled during the school day anyway. So there are many ways to look at it, and that's why we want to make sure that it is a case-by-case basis, because it depends on the circumstances. Now, as far as the staffing issues, all I can tell you is that we are certainly cognizant of the problems everybody is having locating appropriate service providers, and we are being as gracious and forgiving as we can be. And if you are considering compensatory services because this is the problem you have recognized, then you may have a little more grace than if this has been ordered as a corrective action for something. Compensatory services certainly can be state level complaint, which means you're on a timeline. It can be the result of some problem with indicators. It can be the result of something in program reviews. All of those things, because of the nature of those services, those procedures do include a timeline. So if you determine that there is a need for it on your own without having the consideration ordered as a corrective action for something, then you give yourself a little more leeway and a little more latitude in how you determine a timeline and appropriate people, because that can be your regular staff, it can be contracted services, it can be whatever, and it can be depending on what services you need. What services do you need to provide? And that'll vary child by child. It may not be the whole IEP. It may not be 3 of the 7 goals. I mean, it may just be a piece of something that was missing.
Any other questions for Anne?
And I have a question. This is Lisa.
Okay.
And we've got a lot of questions, like you were talking about the shortage of teachers.
Yeah.
And what if I had a substitute all year because we just couldn't find anybody, and that substitute's not a certified special ed
Right.
substitute? And, you know, my guidance has always been, so at the end of that school year, you
Mhm.
know, when you're looking at, do we owe compensatory services for that? That's another, it depends.
It is,
Um,
it depends, yeah.
Because if the child met their IEP goals within that year, certified teacher or not, there was not an impact to that child. If the
Correct.
child did not meet their goals, and maybe, you know, then you're talking about, you know,
Mhm.
compensatory services.
Yeah,
And
that's
you
true.
can expand on that, Anne.
Okay, and that's very true. And in that situation, there a couple of things come to mind immediately. One is that if the child could meet all their IEP goals without instruction from an appropriately certified staff member, then there may have been some miscalculation in the development of those goals in the first place. If you could do it without a teacher, without a certified teacher. On the other hand, we all know that there are retired teachers, people who are no longer certified, or people who are just really good natural teachers who can provide services, certification area or not. So that's why you must look at the data. Every time a child doesn't meet IEP goals doesn't mean you owe compensatory services either. That's why you have to look at in each case individually. If you know a child didn't master a goal, but you also know why, and it had nothing to do with the failure to provide the services, then that's not a compensatory decision. That is just revisit why the child didn't master the goal and what do we need to do? Do we need to amend the goals? Do we need to provide some additional supports? That becomes just a regular kind of IEPT decision, not a compensatory decision. But the staffing needs right now nationwide, this is not specific to us in South Carolina, are wreaking havoc, frankly, on everybody's best laid plans, because no matter what you plan to do, it doesn't take but a minute before you get off track. And that's why we want to make sure that you do consider it individually and in a timely manner. Don't let something like this fester and wait for the parent to say, my child didn't meet any of his goals, he's not making progress because you didn't provide services, and I'm going to file a complaint. I mean, that would be the least of the ways you would like to deal with it. You would rather be proactive and upfront and just say, you know, because the parents already know, they already know if the teacher's out, if you have a long-term sub, many of them will ask if that long-term sub is properly certified. And for our purposes, if it is something that we have required, then we would expect the district to produce for us evidence that they tried to find appropriately certified staff in the first place, and also to provide the compensatory services. That may mean, what efforts did you make? What are your recruitment activities? What was your recruitment plan? Did you have job fairs? Did you go recruiting to colleges? Did you interview people? What have you done to try to find somebody? Now, that doesn't remove the need to consider compensatory, but it does, again, it allows us to give you a little grace because we know you have done your due diligence to try to eliminate the problems created by staffing issues. And that's all you can do, and we know that. We have a number of districts who have been through our program review process and staffing. As you know, you all submit those staffing reports every time, and have had some people who are not appropriately certified. And we ask that you try to find somebody, find some folks. alternative pathways to certification, whatever. Find what you can find. But at the bottom line, at the end is, what have you done to try? Show us your good faith effort to remove the problem. And then we will, as I said, we will give you as much grace as we can. If it gets to a state level complaint or due process complaint or something like that, then that becomes a little more out of our hands. But we will work with you in any way we can. And if you are trying to address it up front before it reaches that level, then that you do put yourselves in a better position, because parents know, and parents appreciate that you are trying to fix this. You recognize there's an issue and you are doing what you can do to help fix it. And they will be a little more willing most of the time, not always certainly, to work with you on what they think their child needs as well. The big thing is that we've got to get past the idea that if you missed 72 hours of services, you owe 72 hours of services, because that is not reasonable. It is not realistic. And in many cases, it would not solve the problem in the first place. Anything else?
And this is Elizabeth. There was a question in the chat that I'm not sure we got answered.
Okay.
The question is, if a student is absent for a period of time, such as 1 or 2 weeks of school, shouldn't the team consider compensatory services? This could be due to the student's sickness, for example, or should the team only consider makeup services?
That's another, it depends. If the child is just absent, that is not the district's failure to provide services. That is due to an absence that is not within the district's power to control. So initially, it is not a compensatory services decision to be made. Now, should the IEP team take a look at what does this mean in terms of the child's progress, then certainly you should. And if that means you make some adjustments to services, then as an IEP team, you would decide to do that. But that would be a separate decision from true compensatory services. Compensatory, it assumes a denial of services by the district. And just a child being absent is not anything that the district has done to result in a failure to provide services. So if it continued, then you would want to look at, why is that child absent? Is there another placement model that might be better, just as part of the IEP, but not as a compensatory issue? Does that make sense? Okay, anybody else? If you have specific questions about a specific case, then certainly give me a call, shoot me an email or something. I will be happy to walk through it case by case with you. I don't want to say too much here that will confuse somebody else whose situation may be just a little bit different, because sometimes I feel like we give our best guidance with the best intentions, and sometimes it muddies the water because the situation that you're facing is just a little bit different from the one we're talking about. So I don't mean to not answer any questions. I just want to make sure that I address your specific needs if I talk to you about it. I'm going to stop sharing now, so at least I can see everybody. Oh, there you are. And I had sent this to Sarah this morning, and she will get it to you, this particular presentation. This was more in lieu of notes pages. That's why there's so much text on the page. But we wanted to keep it short and sweet and something that you could use as a reference document. So any questions from anybody? Questions, comments, anything I didn't mention? I did not know specific questions that you had, other than we've just in general been getting more questions about compensatory services. Okay, so Lisa, you're still around?
Yes, I am.
All right, then. Then I'm
Okay,
going to
then.
go ahead and stop sharing. And I think the virtual part this was the entire virtual part as far as I know. Is there anything else I can do for y'all?
Okay,
Anything
have
else?
a great day.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.